Picture the early 20th century, a time when America was still finding its footing in a rapidly changing world. The Great War had ended, the Roaring Twenties were on the horizon, and small towns like Woolstock, Iowa, were quiet pockets of simplicity. It was here, on January 5, 1914, that George Kiefer Brewer was born to Don Brewer and Helen Lesher. His parents' marriage was already fraying by the time he arrived, and within months they split. Helen, a strong-willed woman of German descent, took her infant son and left Iowa behind, first for relatives in Kentucky, then to Galesburg, Illinois, and finally to Pasadena, California. This constant uprooting planted a seed of restlessness in young George, a sense that home was never quite permanent. Pasadena, though, would become his anchor. By the 1920s, it was a sunny haven for dreamers, a place where orange groves met the budding glamour of Hollywood. Helen remarried a man named Frank Basolo, who adopted George, giving him a new surname and a semblance of stability. But the boy's early years were marked by absence. His biological father was a ghost he'd never know. Growing up in Pasadena, George was a kid with charm and energy to spare. He had a boxer's build, broad shoulders, and a smile that could light up a room. School friends later recalled him as the guy who could make you laugh, the one who'd strum a guitar at a party or step into the ring for a sparring match. Boxing became an early passion. He racked up an impressive 31-0 record by his late teens, his fists as quick as his wit, but it was the stage that truly called him. At Pasadena Junior College, he joined the a cappella choir and threw himself into school plays, his deep voice and natural charisma turning heads. The Pasadena Community Playhouse, a local gem that churned out talent, became his proving ground. There, he met Eleanora Needles, a fellow actress with a quiet grace. They married in 1940, young and full of ambition. But their union would falter under the weight of George's dreams. The 1930s were a golden age for Hollywood, a factory of stars and stories. Movies were escapism for a nation battered by the Great Depression, and studios like Warner Brothers and MGM were empires unto themselves. George, now in his early 20s, was determined to break in. He adopted the stage name Reeves, a nod to his mother's maiden name, and a way to stand out in a sea of hopefuls. His big break came in 1939, a small but unforgettable role as Stuart Tarleton in Gone with the Wind. If you've seen the film, he's the red-headed suitor chatting with Scarlett O'Hara on the porch of Tara, his southern drawl smooth as honey. The role was brief, but it put him on the map. Warner Brothers signed him, and for a moment it seemed like the sky was the limit. He starred in a string of B pictures, films like Tear Gas Squad and Calling All Husbands, and while they weren't masterpieces, they showcased his versatility. He could play a tough guy, a romantic lead, or a soldier with equal ease. Then came World War II. Like so many of his generation, George's life was upended. In 1943, just as he landed a starring role opposite Claudette Colbert in So Proudly We Hail, he enlisted in the Army. The film was a hit, his performance as a wounded soldier earning praise, but the war put his career on hold. He joined the Special Theatrical Unit, performing in morale-boosting shows for troops, his charisma undimmed even in khaki. Those years were a mix of pride and frustration. He was serving his country, but Hollywood was moving on without him. When he returned to civilian life in 1945, the industry had changed. New stars had emerged, and George struggled to regain his footing. He took small roles in films, like The Blue Gardenia and Forever Female, but the A-list stardom he'd once glimpsed seemed out of reach. Friends noticed a quiet bitterness creeping in, a sense that his talent was being overlooked. Enter television, the scrappy upstart of the entertainment world. In 1951, George was offered a role that would change his life, Clark Kent, aka Superman, in a new series called Adventures of Superman. At first he hesitated. TV was seen as a step down from film, a medium for has-beens and newcomers. But the role was steady work, and the show's pilot, Superman and the Mole Men, had a gritty charm. Shot over 13 grueling weeks in the summer of 1951, the first season was a gamble. When it aired in 1952, it was a sensation. Kids across America were glued to their screens, watching George leap from buildings, or at least from springboards, and battle crooks with a wink and a smile. He wasn't just playing Superman, he was Superman, his square jaw and earnest delivery embodying the hero's moral clarity. The show's success made him a household name, but it came with a catch. George was typecast. His identity fused with the Man of Steel in a way that both thrilled and trapped him. Off-screen, George's life was anything but simple. His marriage to Eleonora ended in 1950, a quiet divorce that left him adrift. He threw himself into Hollywood's social scene, his charm drawing admirers like moths to a flame. One of them was Toni Mannix, a former Ziegfeld Follies showgirl, and the wife of MGM executive Eddie Mannix. Toni was 8 years older, glamorous and generous, with a sharp wit and a complicated marriage. Eddie, known as a fixer with rumored ties to the underworld, seemed to tolerate their affair, an open secret in Hollywood's tangled web of power and desire. Toni became George's lover, his confidant, even his benefactor. She bought him a house at 1579 Benedict Canyon Road, a cozy retreat where they could escape the world. Their relationship was intense, passionate, but also fraught. George was a man who craved independence, yet Toni's support came with strings. As Adventures of Superman soared, so did George's public persona. He made personal appearances across the country, mobbed by kids who believed he could fly. He took the role seriously, quitting smoking to set a good example and dodging questions about his private life with a practiced grin. But behind the scenes, he was restless. The show's grueling schedule, 13 episodes shot in just 7 weeks each year, left little room for other work. His contract's 30-day clause meant producers could demand his exclusive services on short notice, stifling his film ambitions. Still, there were bright spots. He poured his heart into charity, raising funds for the Myasthenia Gravis Foundation and earning a national chairmanship in 1955. Co-stars like Jack Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen, remembered George's warmth, his knack for making everyone on set feel valued. Yet Larson also saw the strain, the late nights, the drinking, the gnawing fear that Superman was all he'd ever be. By the late 1950s, George's life was a tangle of triumphs and tensions. The show was a hit, but its cancellation in 1958 hit him hard. He was 44, still handsome, still talented, but the roles he wanted, serious, dramatic parts, weren't coming. He took a job directing a sci-fi film and planned a media tour to Australia. Signs that his career wasn't over, but his personal life was unraveling. In 1958, he broke things off with Toni Mannix, a decision that left her devastated. Almost immediately, he began dating Lenore Lemon, a New York socialite with a reputation for volatility. Lenore was younger, fiery, and unpredictable, her presence a stark contrast to Toni's steady devotion. Their relationship was stormy, marked by public arguments and late-night drinking. Friends whispered that Lenore brought out George's wild side, but also his recklessness. Then came the strange incidents. In early 1959, George survived 3 near-fatal car accidents, the last revealing that his Jaguar's brake fluid had been drained. He filed a report with the Los Angeles DA, naming Toni as a possible suspect, though no charges were ever filed. Late-night phone calls plagued him, some threatening, others eerily silent. He told friends he felt watched, hunted even, but he brushed it off with a laugh. Was it paranoia or something more sinister? As his engagement to Lenore deepened, George seemed to teeter between hope and despair. He was set to marry her in just days, to honeymoon in Spain, to start anew. But the shadow of Superman loomed large, and the weight of his choices, his loves, his losses, his dreams, was heavier than any cape. That brings us to the night of June 15th, 1959. George had been drinking with his fiancée, Lenore Lemon, and a small group of friends, William Bliss, Carol Van Ronkel, and Robert Condon. The party was impromptu, the kind of gathering that Hollywood nights often spawned. Around 1 a.m., George, visibly tired and perhaps frustrated, excused himself and went upstairs to his bedroom. Lenore stayed downstairs, keeping the mood light. Then, sometime between 1:30 and 2 a.m., a gunshot rang out. Bliss, who rushed upstairs, found George lying across his bed, a .30 caliber Luger pistol on the floor, a single bullet wound in his temple. The police arrived quickly, their report straightforward. Suicide. George, they said, had been depressed, drinking heavily, and facing a career stall. Case closed. But for those who knew him, and for the millions who loved him as Superman, it wasn't that simple. There were oddities from the start. The bullet's trajectory was unusual, angled upward, suggesting an awkward position for a self-inflicted wound. No fingerprints were found on the gun, not even George's. Despite his supposed handling of it, the shell casing was found under his body, an unlikely spot if he'd fired the shot himself. And then there was the delay. Lenore and the guests waited nearly 30 minutes to call the police, a fact that raised eyebrows. Witnesses later gave conflicting accounts. Lenore claimed George was despondent, but Bliss said he seemed merely tired. Neighbors reported hearing no arguments, yet one mentioned a second shot never officially confirmed. These inconsistencies fueled whispers of foul play, whispers that grew louder when George's mother, Helen, arrived from Illinois demanding answers. She hired a private investigator, convinced her son would never take his own life. The controversies around George's death are a maze of theories and half-truths. The official verdict, suicide, rested on his supposed depression. Police pointed to his drinking, the Superman cancellation, and his stalled career. But those who knew him pushed back. Larson insisted George was optimistic, planning a boxing documentary and a wedding. His mother's investigator uncovered inconsistencies. The lack of gunpowder residue, the gun's pristine condition, the guest's delayed call to police. Some theorized murder. Lenore became a suspect. Her erratic behavior and a rumored argument that night raised red flags. Others looked to Toni Mannix, her heartbreak and connections to Eddie fueling speculation of a revenge plot. A wilder theory even implicated Eddie himself, tying George's death to Hollywood's shadowy underbelly. Yet no concrete evidence emerged, and the case was never reopened. Skeptics of the murder theories argue the truth is simpler. George's painkiller use, combined with heavy drinking, could have clouded his judgment. His career, while not dead, was uncertain, and the pressure of being Superman weighed heavily. A close friend, Art Weissman, later shared a haunting memory. Weeks before his death, George confessed, "I'm tired, Art, tired of being a symbol." This lends credence to the suicide narrative, but it doesn't erase the doubts. The absence of a note, the strange forensics, the unanswered questions about Lenore and Toni, none of it fits neatly. Hollywood itself became a character in the debate, its culture of secrets and power casting a long shadow. As historian Jim Beaver put it, in this town, truth is just another script to rewrite. George's death rippled far beyond that night. For fans, it was a loss of innocence. Superman, the symbol of hope, was mortal after all. The adventures of Superman faded from airwaves, but its reruns kept George's face alive, a bittersweet reminder of his legacy. His mother spent her final years chasing justice, her grief a rallying cry for those who believed in foul play. Toni Mannix, racked with guilt, reportedly confessed to a priest years later that she'd caused George's death, though she never clarified how. Lenore left Hollywood, her life spiraling into obscurity. She died in 1989, still dodging questions about that night. The house on Benedict Canyon Road became a morbid landmark, its new owners reporting eerie noises, though skeptics chalked it up to legend. Culturally, George's story reshaped how we see celebrities. His typecasting as Superman highlighted the industry's cruelty, how it could elevate a man to godhood, then discard him when the spotlight shifted. His death sparked conversations about mental health, long before it was openly discussed. In the 1980s, the book Hollywood Kryptonite reignited interest, blending fact and speculation to argue for murder. The 2006 film Hollywoodland, with Ben Affleck as George, brought his story to a new generation, framing it as a noir mystery. Both works, while dramatized, underscored a truth. George was more than his end. He was a man who fought for his dreams, loved fiercely, and carried the weight of a hero's image in a world that rarely saw the man beneath. Why does George Reeves still matter? Because his life is a mirror to our own struggles, ambition, identity, the search for meaning. He was a star who shone brightest in his quiet moments, the charity work, the friendships, the guitar strums at cast parties. His death, shrouded in mystery, reminds us that even heroes are human, their stories unfinished. It's why fans still visit his grave, why forums debate his fate, why his face on old TV screens feels like a friend. George didn't just play Superman. He showed us what it means to carry a cape, to rise, to fall, and to be remembered. So, as we close this tale, let's picture George not on that final night, but in a brighter moment. Maybe laughing with Jack Larson on set, or signing autographs for wide-eyed kids. His smile saying, "I'm here, I'm trying." His life was a story of resilience, of a man who soared despite the odds, only to be grounded by forces we may never fully understand. The mystery of his death endures, but so does his light, a light that no shadow, no gunshot can ever dim. George Reeves wasn't just Superman. He was one of us, and that's why we'll never stop telling his story.